Ready?
Yeah.
Right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Local Pension Board, Wednesday, the 17th of August. It is 10 a.m. We are holding this meeting on a Microsoft, and it is recorded and can be viewed by the public. Item 1 on our agenda are the minutes of our meeting held on the 4th of May 22. They are on pages 3 to 8 on your agenda. Does everybody agree that these are correct records, or do you have any comments? I see no hands, I see no comments, so we accept them as a true record. Thank you. Item 2 on our agenda is the question time, and I have been advised no questions have been received by the officers. Item 3 on our agenda is to advise of any other items which I, the chairman, has decided to take as an urgent item elsewhere on the agenda, and there are none. So therefore, we should have a very smooth, short meeting. Item 4, declaration of interest in respect of any item on the agenda. Are there any declarations of interest by anybody at this time? And I see no hands up on my screen, so there are no declarations of interest. Hang on, I have just got to check if we had any apologies, and we had no apologies. So we're all...
apologies from Manjit and Ruth.
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, so we accept the apologies from Ruth Gilbert and Manjit Soroya, and Councillor Shepherd and Councillor Fairclough and Deepak and myself as members are in attendance. And so, without further ado, we are going to item 5, the Pension Fund Administration Report from June 22, quarter 1. And it is on your agenda pack, page 9 to 20, and I hand over to Ian Howe, the pension manager, for introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. As the Chair says, this is the quarterly admin report, April to June, quarter 1 of the financial year. This is the standard report that I present each quarter. So I'll go through it stage by stage as I normally do, and happy to take any questions at the end. Start with the KPIs. The KPIs are found on page 19 of your pack. The one thing I wanted to particularly point out is the fall in the death benefits in terms of getting information out to members within 10 working days. The KPI in that area is 90%. We only managed to achieve 76% in the quarter, which was expected. It's because we were putting as much resource as we could from that area into completing the information for year end and annual benefit statements and indeed valuation. So it was unfortunate, but that was the reality. We had to move resource to move the critical work to get the valuation done in year end. The one good point I want to raise though is whilst there was a fall in that area, it didn't affect the overall customer perspective feedback. And in actual fact, the quarter represented an excellent customer feedback set of results, and they're also on Appendix A on page 19 of the pack. And all of those were 93% or above. So very, very happy with the overall customer feedback. But I did want to make that point about the deaths. In terms of the stat The stats for April, May and June, they're displayed on the report pages 10 and 11. The key areas I really wish to mention there is the fact that we were working really hard, as you know, on clearing as many of the outstanding levers for the valuation. So that was particularly the preserved benefits and the aggregations, with over 500 cases being cleared in May and June. The figures here are slightly misrepresented in regard to why there is a sudden increase now again in aggregations. The reason for that particularly is that Fusion, which is the payroll system used by the county council and obviously a number of the other employers in the fund, I think it covers somewhere in the region of about 60 employers in our fund. We were getting we received late information off the back of the Fusion, which meant that the year end was condensed quite significantly for that employer and those employers. And the knock-on effect of that is we had about 3 or 4 months reports run really late, so that then generated a big peak. So in terms of what I mean there is every month that would run, it would generate a number of aggregations, a number of PBs. That wasn't run for 3 or 4 months because the delays in getting the information to us. It was then run in block, so it suddenly sent a big spike in aggregations. But overall, I think the progress made has been really, really good for the valuation, and it's certainly been a very, very challenging quarter. In terms of the other areas, IDRPs, the complaints, disputes, there was a new IDRP stage 2, which I just wanted to mention to you. We've talked about the historic claims management company requests on behalf of members on historic transfers out, where they're now saying members were badly advised or weren't advised. We've had one of those now come through to stage 2, so we'll see how that progresses. Other cases, other appeals, no progress on any of the others, but there are very, very few of them, as you know. In terms of data improvement, excellent progress on that. Now only 6 employers out of 176 not posting monthly, which has been a phenomenal effort, a phenomenal achievement by the section, and has really gone a long way to helping us maintain and get through year end as efficiently as we have done. So huge credit to the team in pensions that have been dealing with that over the last few years. In terms of excuse me, in terms of annual benefit statements, huge amount of work has been done in that as well, and I anticipate that we will get annual benefit statements to all of our active members, bar only one employer. One employer has not yet completed their admission agreement, and that's Total Swim, who we've talked about before. This is moving forward, but it's complicated. There's some legal issues around the way that this has been set up between the company and the outsourcing employer, which is effectively caused a delay in getting the admission agreement completed, which has effectively meant those 7 staff won't get their annual benefit statements. We have written to the 7 members of staff, so they're aware, they understand the situation, and we will get their statements to them as soon as this is signed and backdated. But out of nearly 38,000, only 7 people won't receive their statement because of that, which I think is a phenomenal achievement. In terms of other wider aspect areas, I just wanted to briefly mention dashboards. I think this is quite important to make you aware of. I know we've talked about it very briefly, but I thought it would be useful to give you a little bit of an update on dashboards, just by way of a reminder, or for the new members of the board. This is the national programme that is going to allow members of the UK, residents of the UK, to log into the dashboard. So they will have their own unique login, and they will be able to log into a dashboard, and they will be able to view all of their pension information in one place. So that's occupational pensions, personal pensions, things of that nature, all in one place. That obviously affects all pension schemes, including the local government pension scheme, and obviously affects us. We're working on that project, and you know that will continue. There's a long way to go for this. It's not until September 24 before the data has to be submitted, so we're a long way off that yet, but it is going to be a very significant project that's going to come through to the pension section, so we need to be prepared and aligned for that. I'll talk about that in far more detail over the coming months and years, but I did think it was worth mentioning at this point. The other reason I wanted to mention it is the pension dashboard program, the PDP as they're called, have started a consultation that ends in August around this, and I've detailed that on page 14 of the pack. I don't intend to reply to the consultation. I've looked at the information. It's very technical in nature. And because it's a national project, we're working closely with Hayward's, who are our system provider, and they are working for funds, of which we're one of many. So they're dealing with a great deal of this on behalf of funds. And the local government association are also dealing with it from the administrative side as well. So I feel we're well protected in this area, and there's a long way to go in that area. So I'll come back to that again in future. Other areas, audit. We had 3 audits in the quarter, which is significant. We don't normally have 3 in a quarter, but we did. We had one on pension creations. There were no recommendations in the audit report, which is great. Excuse me again. McLeod, which Stuart has kindly done a report on separately, so I won't touch on that at the moment. Stuart will go through that later. And the Good Governance Project. That was to provide assurance to the management that the recommendations of the Good Governance Project have been adequately addressed and implemented. There were 2 recommendations that officers have agreed to, and once the final guidance from the Department for Levelling Up has come through, we will review that again. But we're comfortable where we are on all of those 3 areas. Moving on again, I appreciate there's a lot in the report, sorry, but I'm nearly there. The regulations, new regulations came into force on nudge. Nudge is new national guidance where we have to guide people where they have additional voluntary contributions. It only affects us in our fund for members with AVCs. I think we've got just over 1,000 members with AVC, so there aren't a huge amount. And it's basically at the point the member takes their benefits. If they've got an AVC, it guides them into different things that they can do, but basically it's guiding them to taking advice with pensions wise, although the member doesn't have to do that. But that's something we've incorporated into all of our communications to meet the legislation. National update the cost cap, the 2016 cost cap. So if you cast your minds back 6 years, for those of you who have been doing this long enough, the results have now finally been completed for the 2016 cost cap. That was paused, you may recall, whilst the McLeod remedy or the McLeod costs were being worked through. The final results of this now indicate that the results of the cost cap are within the 2% limit, which means members' benefits won't be changed. So that resolved that point, other than to say the 2016 cost cap results are still being challenged legally. So whilst this bit of the hurdle has now been completed, the final part hasn't been, because of course, if the legal challenge is upheld, then that will reopen that situation. So whilst we're over the 2016 cost cap from the 2% perspective, we're not there in terms of the overall final results because the legal challenge is pending. The Code of practice, TPR code of practice, we're still awaiting that. So I won't dwell on that one. We'll come back to that one at some point when that comes through to us. Employer risk, which is the standard area within the report, gives you an indication of all the employer admissions and bonds outstanding. They're on page 16 of your pack onwards. The highest risk one is the life mat, which I've already talked about, which, as I said, hasn't been completed to total swim because the legal issues. All parties are fully engaged in this. They all understand the need to do this, and they all understand the risks here while this remains unsigned. It's not as though no one is actually committed here. Everybody is. It's just they're working through the legal implications of this situation. But it's still on there because of the implications to members not getting their benefit statements. There are a number of other high categories in the report as well, but these ones are less high risk because they are all since April, so they all fall into this financial year, not the last financial year, so it doesn't impact on year end and it doesn't impact on annual benefit statements. Number of those are all being worked through. All parties are fully engaged, so they're on here for completeness, but in actual fact most of these I'm sure will be completed within the next week or two. In fact, I'm convinced at least 2 or 3 of them will be, but they are all there for completeness. I don't particularly wish to dwell on any of those in particular. I'm comfortable that they are all going to get complete. The knowledge and understanding point is the training and the Hyman's online training that I know board members are working through. I do appreciate this. This isn't always the easiest of systems to work through, and I'm very happy to take any comments from any of the board members who are working through this. If you've got any points you would like me to collate and send back to Hyman's, I'm very happy to do so, and I'll do that outside of the meeting if that's okay with you all. That completes all I wanted to say on the report, but obviously I'm very happy to take any questions, Chair and colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Ian. And as always, it is a very comprehensive report, but it is so full of information. I think it gives us very little wiggle room for questions, so which is a good thing. And it is appreciated. Thank you. I would just like to say again, reiterate credit to your team because I think it's outstanding. So I'm sure you're going to pass that on because it's quite sterling work they have done over this time. And to just reiterate your last comment, in case members have any problems, I know I have, and I did tell Kat, so she knows I find it very confusing, very irritating, but then I am not an IT person, so it might be me. So if members can pass it on. And with that, are there any questions on Ian's report? Please speak up. I cannot see any hands up. Nothing from the members. Ian, you've done an absolutely sterling job again. Thank you very much and very appreciated. And yes, that's it. So without further ado, we are now moving over to item 6 on our agenda, which is the pension fund valuation for 22. That report is on pages 21 to 76 on your agenda. And again, it is over to Ian to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to provide you really with information. It's for noting. As you know, we've been working through the valuation for near on a year already in terms of various elements of the work we need to do for the valuation. This report is specifically around the assumptions that are used within the valuation. So I'm not looking really so much on the data side here. This is really sort of the mechanics that sit behind the calculation methodology that Hymans use. So this is kind of the mathematical side of the valuation from the number crunching side. I think it's important to say that these assumptions have already been to the committee. This went to Pensions Committee on the 10th of June and they were approved. So this is really for information only, but I think it's worth sharing with you because I think it sort of sets the scene in terms of the way that the sort of the assumptions work in the background. I wasn't particularly going to dwell on each one individually because I appreciate some of them are quite technical, and you've got the covering report from Hymans that details sort of the detail behind the calculations. But what I was just going to really do was kind of take you to the sort of the table at the end of the report, and then I was going to go to the timetable because I think that's really quite important in terms of the timetable. But if you could go to the table that's on page 27 of your report, this is the summary of the assumptions that were taken to the committee, and this is the mathematics behind it. So longevity, this is how long people are expected to live, obviously kind of calculated as an average, and this is actually based on our own fund itself. This isn't sort of a national value. This is the actual fund specific information based on Leicestershire's own demographics. And you'll see that the long-term trend is a 1.5% annual improvement in longevity. And I just wanted to particularly point on that one because I think when we started with COVID and there was a lot of unknown around COVID, I think we thought maybe the longevity assumption would actually potentially cease, i.e. not get longer. It would possibly even reduce or stay where it is. But it seems as though that's not the case. The long-term calculation methodology that Hymans are using is the long-term trend of 1.5% annual improvement. So I wanted to just point on that one out. The investment return is 4.4% per annum, assumed investment return between 0 and 20 years. And what we do there is we aim to meet a 75% success rate. And that's a value that we're comfortable with as a fund, 75%. The discount rate beyond 20 years, what we do there is we then use the fund's agreed level of prudence, which is 75%. So what we're effectively saying there is beyond 20 years, it's really hard to kind of continually estimate what the investments will be. So we just use a discount rate of 75%, sorry, of a prudence rate of 75% from that point onwards. Benefit revaluation and pensions increase. This is arguably the most difficult one at the moment. I mean, today is the day where I'm sure you've seen the press this morning already. Inflation went above 10% for the first time in 40 years, I think. 10.1% was announced this morning. What we're doing here with Hymans is we're trying to model CPI over 20 years. And Hymans are of the view that the current increase in CPI won't be maintained. And they believe that the long-term CPI is going to be around about 2.7%. And that's for the sort of 20-year span. So that's what we're going to use. But that is the one where we're closely monitoring that, and obviously Hymans are as well. Salary increases, we basically use 0.5% above CPI on salary increases. The other key point on salary increases, though, is that this assumption is becoming less important, and that might sound odd, really, but what I mean by that is because we're now in a career average world, and career average is 1/49th accrual year on year for your received pay in that year, and then that locks in, and then that's inflation proofed. The salary increases are particularly key for the final salary service, so pre-care. So you used to have 80th and 60th for those members that have still got it. Now, just by the nature that people are now retiring and leaving and new people are coming into the scheme, the members with the final salary service is reducing. It's reducing naturally because those members are now leaving and retiring. And that's the key assumption for those members. So that assumption is reducing in need because there's less members with that. And then the others is model information using Club Vita analysis, which is detailed in the report if you so choose to read it. The timetable, just going back, and that starts on page 25 of your pack and goes into page 26. This is the stages that we've been working through for the valuation. And the third column, the column on the right-hand side, shows you where we're at. So we've done all of those where it says done or complete. The current stages provide Hymans with the fund data. My colleague Stuart, who's on the meeting today, he ran the live data cut on Monday. So this is literally happening as we speak, and literally this morning Stuart was working through the errors and the critical errors that have come off that we need to resolve before the data is submitted. So we're literally in the middle of that process right now. The other current stage.
Sorry, Ian, is that September, October calculate whole fund results? Is that what you're referring to?
No, in August, sorry, in August 22, provide Hymans with the full fund data. I beg your pardon, Chair.
Right, sorry. So when we calculate it goes to Hymans in September, and then does it come back to this committee at any point after that?
Yeah, it does, Chair. So what happens is we send in the data through to the actuary to Hymans this month, and then the actuaries will work through that information, and then the calculation for the whole fund results will come back to us in October or November, and that will go to the board in the October-November meeting. And then the final results, the employer results, once we have those, they'll come through to me in November. We'll start a consultation with the employers in November, and then the final results will come through to the board in March 23 with the final results and the final position. But at the moment, we're in the final stages of getting that information through to Hymans to start those calculations, Chair and colleagues. That's really kind of where I was going to sort of summarise and finish. So I'm obviously happy to take any questions.
Hang on. Here we go. Thank you again, and as always, it's also comprehensive report. I do like the timetable and the recommendations, and I'm sure all members do. And I've got one hand up, which is Mr. Shepherd. Over to you, Mr. Shepherd.
Thank you. I think Ian has answered this question. I must check my understanding, if I may. It concerns the salary increases element of the table. If I understand correctly, Ian, you're pointing out to us that given there's now the career average system, you're saying actually over the long term, the salary increase has become less significant. Thank you, because I must say, when I first read that, I thought, gosh, I wonder whether we should be revisiting that, given the current level of salary increase claims, the current inflation level, and, for example, the offer made to local government workers recently, about 6%. So it sounds as though actually my first thoughts are really misguided, in that I was looking at the immediate year or two ahead, and you're saying to us, despite what could be, I think, some pretty big increases in people's salaries and big inflation rises, in the longer term, bearing in mind care, naturally will be less rather than more significant. Have I understood correctly? Thank you.
You absolutely have, Mr. Shepherd. Your understanding is exactly correct. What I would say, the only caveat I would say, is because CPI is increasing so quickly at the moment, we do have this under review with Hymans, even in the short term. So whilst what you've said is exactly right in terms of the long term, we may have to tweak that 2.7 slightly in the short term, just because CPI is increasing so quickly. But that will be ultimately Hyman's view, and we will take guidance from them. But to answer your question, yes, indeed, you're correct in what you're assuming there, Mr. Shepherd. Yeah.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense, and I'm pleased to hear that you are keeping under review with Hymans. Thank you very much. I'm now looking to try to learn my hand. Forgive me when I fiddle around with this.
Thank you. Okay. I'm looking around. There are no other hands up today, Ian. And with that, and without further ado, we are then moving to item 7, which is also yours, which is the Pension Fund Annual Report and Accounts 21-22. With all of the appendices, they are page 77 to 166 on your agenda, plenty to read. This, while the prior reports were for noting, this report is also for commenting, and comments from members are appreciated. Over to Ian again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't literally going to dwell at all on this report, because I am obviously, what you say is exactly right, Chair. This report is there for your views, and I'm obviously happy to take those. This is the annual report for 21-22. I must say we've done this a lot quicker this year in terms of the way it's been pulled together, accepting that the accounts are in the process of being audited, and the board and committee will be updated at the earliest possible opportunity once we have the auditor's view on those. But in terms of the detail in the actual report that's available, we've pulled that information together earlier to allow comments, to allow board to have any comments, and indeed obviously committee as well. This will go through to committee on the 9th of September at their meeting, and then from there, once we get the final accounts, that will be incorporated, and then they'll be completed by the 12th of December, which is the date of the annual general meeting. We actually have to complete them for the 1st of December, which we'll do, and then they'll be presented at the annual meeting on the 12th at the AGM. So I wasn't particularly going to dwell on it, because the information is really quite detailed. There's a lot of information in there, and I wasn't going to sort of particularly highlight any key areas or any areas, but I'm obviously very happy to take any questions from any board members on any of the points within the report.
For a lot of holiday or bedtime reading. Are there any comments for the record from any of the members at this time on this committee? I can see no hands up at all, Ian. This seems to be a very swift meeting. None. I checked again. And with that, and without further ado, we are then moving to agenda item 8, which is the Local Pension Board Annual Report 21-22. Now, that report is on your agenda, page 167 to 178. Now, this report, members, it is for you to approve. This is our only item on the agenda which we actually have to approve. Within that report, it is the chairman's report, which is my report on page 171, which also goes forward. And before any of the members say anything, on page 171, the penultimate paragraph, we have got a little computer error. I think, Kat, to note, please, it says F and then IND, out more, about I, have attached. So we have to slightly correct and alter that sentence before we go forward. I think it should read, to find out more about this report, I have attached a link. So I think something went missing there. So is that also you, Ian, to report this, to present this report?
I wasn't planning on doing so, but I think you've summarised it perfectly, Councillor Page. So it's really the report for
yes,
for
it's
your
the 12th
yourself.
of December, isn't it? It's going to.
The plan is that it will go to the local pension committee on the 9th of September, and then also to the annual pension fund AGM, which is scheduled for the 12th of December.
Yes.
So really, it's just if members have any comments before you want to approve
Yes.
it. So I'll correct that part in.
Yes.
Partly just post out.
And thank you very much for all of the work and help to Kat. And please note that the report is backward looking and it outlines the key works which were undertaken over the last 12 months by the board. And as Kat just said, subject to your approval, and I will ask you all, it will move forward. So are there any comments? Yes, from Caroline. Over to Caroline, please.
Only to say, Mrs. Page, I thought the report was excellent, and I do think it's a real good, true and honest representation of all the work that's taken place over the past 12 months. So in terms of its content, I'm absolutely more than happy to give my support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that is really appreciated coming from you as an employee representative, because after all, this is part of the public record for all of our members to be reassured. Yes, and just a comment on my report, we are trying to keep it as short and succinct as possible because we can't, or I can't really add anything, and I do normally like to say something I understand and I can identify with. So if it meets all of your approval, may I just go around and ask Councillor Shepherd, are you happy with that?
Yes, thank you, I am, thank you.
Deepak, are you happy with that? Deepak, are you there? No, I don't think. And Caroline is happy with that. And I am. So we then note, hang on, I've got to get we note the pension fund annual report 21-22, and we thank all of the officers involved. And
Chairman,
yes.
Chairman, sorry, I'm going to make one really boring point. I'm trying to resist it, really.
No, don't resist it.
Since you've asked, I think just for accuracy, I think the word complemented needs to have an E rather than I in the middle. Sorry, boring retired teacher's comment, but for the sake of pure accuracy, I couldn't in the end resist, I'm afraid, saying that. My apologies to all concerned.
Thank you. No, it is appreciated. Okay,
I think that corrects the meaning.
Thank you very, very much. So that completes this report, and I don't know where Deepak has disappeared to. Right. No. Okay, so we are now going to item number 9, and I'm certainly really impressed with that. And that is the McLeod Remedy Report on pages 179 to 186 on your agenda. It was written and it will be presented by Stuart Wells. And Stuart, I am so impressed. It just about well, it really completed the whole system, and it gave me, and I'm sure everybody else, all of the, as I like to say, all of the meat on the bones of that huge skeleton. So over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, everyone. The purpose of this report is to provide an update regarding progress made in respect of the implementation of the McLeod remedy for the affected members of the pension fund. So just a quick recap. The protections introduced for older members of public service pension schemes in 2014 were ruled to be discriminatory against the younger members who had no such protections. And the government has ruled that as a result, there will be changes to all main public service schemes, including the LGPS. And the name of the ruling is often referred to as the McLeod judgment, after a member of the judge's pension scheme that was involved in the case. The protection that applied to the older members will now apply to those members who are active on the 1st of April 2012, regardless of age. The ruling isn't actually expected to affect the level of pension paid to that many members. The latest estimate was around 1% of members that will be affected by this. However, the work involved in collating and uploading the data to identify these cases will be extremely time consuming. The ruling is expected to come into force from the 1st of October 2023 and will be retrospectively applied back to the 1st of April 2014 when the main changes to the scheme applied from. So to date, we initially wrote to scheme employers in September 2020 to advise that we would need to provide the required, that they would need to provide the required data for the relevant members. The data was required. Data required was split into 2 sections. So there were details of any changes in hours that people had worked from April 2014, initially up to the 31st of March 2020, and then details of any unpaid breaks in service that occurred in the same period. We also advised that 2 further submissions would be required for the 2021 tax year and the 21-22 tax year. The National Scheme Advisory Board provided standard templates for the data to be provided on. To date, over half of the employers have provided the required data. However, of those that have not yet provided data, many of the remaining employers will not have many or any scheme members deemed to be in scope for this exercise. And we will establish this as part of the exercise to collect the remaining data. There will also be some employers who are unable to provide missing data because they no longer exist, or they've changed payroll providers, or for other reasons. Now that the deadline has passed for the submission of all data, we will shortly begin to contact those employers for an update on their position. We've also conducted some testing on some of the data received. The initial data loading highlighted an issue with the interface tool provided by our system suppliers that caused existing data held on the system to be overwritten. And a small number of records were affected by this and have all been corrected. So we contacted the suppliers regarding this issue, and changes to the interface tool were made. And whilst this was ongoing, it did result in the project being put on hold whilst the tool was amended and improved. As part of efforts by the system supplier to improve their initial offering, they also developed a report dashboard that allowed for an automated assessment of the quality of data received from employers prior to loading that into our system. The dashboard enabled checks on overlapping dates and incomplete data entries to be performed. Since this report was written, we have concluded that this is helping to a degree with the checking of the data, but we are proceeding cautiously at the moment. In terms of data loaded automatically, nothing yet has been loaded into the live system, though we are close to doing this with one particular employer, though some issues in respect of specific cases still need to be clarified with the employer themselves. It's unclear how long this project will take to complete. It feels inevitable that a majority of cases will need to be entered into the system manually due to the difficulties in matching records automatically where there are multiple records in respect of members. We are continuing to work through ways to establish a way of matching which we think will increase automation to some degree, though not by a huge amount. We are also still awaiting national guidance in some areas, mainly regarding the treatment of cases where data cannot be provided, and also regarding the possibility of being required to offer members with multiple records who previously elected to keep those records separate a further opportunity to combine those records. In the event that this becomes a requirement, further resource will be needed to deal with that exercise. An initial action plan has been created and is provided on the appendix. This will be kept under review and further updates will be provided to the board at future meetings. An internal audit exercise has been conducted, as Ian mentioned earlier. That was signed off in June and the recommendations are included in this report. I've also mentioned in the report that in addition to this exercise, we are also preparing for a national pension dashboard exercise, which again Ian touched upon, which could impact on the progress of McLeod, though currently that isn't the case. And finally, I just wanted to mention that the McLeod project has already been added to the fund risk register, which will be touched on in the next report. So that's all I wanted to say. So happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. I kick off, and it is again. I think it's brilliant. But and I do like your recommendations and the actions. That's really easy to follow through. When do you foresee an update is going to come back to this committee? How are we going to work it? Are you proposing to bring a regular update or intermittently? How do you see that?
I think at this stage it's probably more likely to be intermittent. It really depends on what kind of progress we can make. We are hopeful that we will start to move more positively in the right direction now that the valuation from the admin side of things is coming to a close, and that we'll be able to put some more resource into this. But wouldn't necessarily say that there'd be anything more to report on in time for the next meeting.
Would you and Ian maybe consider to put, because when we have our pension fund administration report, to put a section in there to just say something, you know, just throwing it in as a aside, to have maybe a little note in that report. Ian, Stuart, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd be certainly happy to do that. I think the way Stuart described it is exactly right. It might be there might be very little to put in there. In some quarters there will be possibly no sort of news other than we're still continuing to work through it, but then there will be changes. I think one of the other keys is once that legislation is actually completed and we actually know finally or the implications on things like the aggregations, as Stuart touched on as well, then we might probably need a wider report to cover those changes. But I'm happy to do a kind of a quarterly update to you all just to keep you posted on that. That's absolutely no problem at all. Happy to do that.
The reason why I was thinking both, it is if members are very keen and follow this committee, either in a written form or just looking at the dashboard. After all, it's their investment, it's their money, that they just, can look, if I was a pension fund member, I would sort of ever so often look at your administration report, just go down and think, yeah, it's still there. It doesn't need anything. That's all I was thinking, because that report is so complete. It just a thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a good idea, and I'm certainly happy to do it. Yeah, I'll do that. And then, as you say, that gives the board, the members of the scheme, an update that they can use if that's how they choose to view it. We do actually have information on member self-service about McLeod as well, and there is a national information on McLeod that the LGA have prepared, and I believe we have a link to that, although I might lean on Stuart to confirm that, to be honest.
Yes, but while I've got you both on there, and I know this, and going just back, is on your members' service a link to this committee or to your pension administration report, so members know that all of this is available? I mean, just a thought to leave with you.
Sure. Yeah.
Because again, to give members the reassurance that there is an awful lot going on in the background. It's regular being reviewed, that we have people like yourself and Stuart working on all of that. And maybe Caroline has got something to say on that. After all, she is the employer's rep. So, and there she is. Over to you, Caroline.
Yeah, I think that's a really excellent idea. I mean, at the end of the day, these reports are in the public domain. Having used the member self-service system, which is absolutely excellent, I do recall there being some information there on McLeod. But I don't think in these situations regarding the different aspects of our pension scheme, you can never provide enough information for people, and then people can choose whether or not they want to read it, but at least it's there. And it is an excellent report, Stuart, and I think what it also does is just give that real confidence, as Mrs. Page has said, to members of the scheme that this is how we're approaching what has been an enormous complex situation that I know has taken significant amounts of time to get to this point. So I would welcome the link to the reports, Mrs. Page, as well. Thank you.
We'll certainly
thank you.
We'll certainly do that. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for the suggestion. We'll make sure that there's a link within MSS to the board area, and then members can get to the reports probably more easily. I mean, they can get to them now, but there'll be it's the information that they will be able to find more easily. So yes, thanks.
Nobody ever goes and trails through the system, and I am one. But if you sent me a link or an email attachment, I will read it, and I think it will give more confidence. So thank you for that. Hands up for anybody who's got any questions to Stuart. And Stuart, there are none. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chair.
And very much appreciate it. And that brings us to item number 10 on our agenda, page 187 to 208, and that is risk management and internal controls. Very important. And over to Ian again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is the standard report that goes to the board and committee that identifies the latest risk register. We review the risk register every quarter, and we make changes to that to reflect any increases or decreases in risk as they occur. We split the risks into 6 separate areas: investment, liability, employer, governance, operational, and regulatory. So each risk sits under one of those 6 headings. There have been a few changes since the meeting in June. They are detailed in the report on page 187 of your pack. I don't particularly plan on going through each of those, but the risks that have been increased or changed, or have got comments on there or changes are detailed in the report. The one that I was just specifically going to raise, though, rather than go through all of them, was the investment risk 3. Just to tell you that the fund is developing a net zero climate strategy to consider the risk and opportunities related to climate change. We have sent information to employers. There's been, I think, 2 bulletins to employers about the climate strategy, and there's been a number of communications that have gone out, and there will be also something in the accompanying email that goes out to active members when they receive their annual benefit statements. But we have sent other targeted information to scheme members about the climate strategy and the consultation, and asking for members' views. So that's the key sort of piece of work that's happened in the last quarter, really, that I wanted to mention. But the other risks are all detailed in the report, and if you have any questions at all, happy to take them at this point.
Thank you, Ian. And again, absolutely brilliant. I know I keep saying it, but it needs to be said. Having on page 188 just cast my eye over the identified risks, could you tell us risk 12, when the audit is going to take place, and then how will that be fed back? Yeah, okay. If the pension section fails to meet the information, cyber security and governance requirements, there may be a breach of statutory obligations. So Stuart is working, we'll be working on a cyber security policy. He did mention that.
He did, actually. He did. Yeah, yes. He did mention it in his report. We're planning on trying to get that completed, or at least a kind of a draft, if you like, for October. And that will be the fund's cyber security, and then that will be a key element to this. If we do breach any of these, there could be obviously big implications. The Good Governance Project and the Pension Regulators Code of Practice, we're waiting on both of those. So the internal audit plan to carry out the review of both of those really once they come in. Now we were kind of expecting I beg your pardon. We were expecting the Pension Regulator Code of Practice by now, so that could be any time. It could be literally, it could arrive tomorrow. So that is due any time. The Good Governance Project is slightly more difficult to predict because that one has been sort of delayed at national level, and I think some of the delay is possibly, but I'm second guessing. I can't say I know this directly. But I think there's a cross between the Good Governance and the Pension Regulator Code of Practice in some areas. And I think they're trying to align the two before they both come out, so one doesn't contradict the other in any area. But what we're doing is trying to get ahead of the game, which is the cyber security policy for October. And then once that's all incomplete, then the auditors will come in and review those for us.
Just as an aside, I mean, also risk 14 and 16 there are also a reference to auditing. Is because of the importance of the scheme and because it is investment and the protection of members who are investing, that there are more audits taking place, because when I'm looking generally across the council, yes, there are audits, but there are never as many audits as there are under this section. Is that for protection? Because members should be really reassured that their external, internal auditors, Hymans, that the money is really, really quite safe and secure. And because of the security, I raised risk 12, because that should give that extra reassurance. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's, I'm pleased you mentioned that, because we work very closely with the auditors, the internal auditors, and we have a very clearly defined audit plan that the auditors produce. I mean, we can feed into it, but ultimately the auditors will say, you know, this is the area that we're really going to delve into, and quite rightly, because that's their role. But they work very much in partnership with us, and that's really very helpful. So I applaud our internal auditors, because they work really closely with us, and we do agree an audit plan. And I think you may recall at the last board meeting, I think it was, or it may have been the one before that, Niru from internal audit brought the audit plan for the following year. And I think the point you raise is right. It shows that there's a clear audit and scrutiny of what goes on in pensions, because of the values, because of the complexity of what we do. And I welcome that. And I'm long may that continue. And if there are other areas like dashboards, possibly might be another one. I'm thinking out loud a little bit here, but because dashboards is going to be a new project, new big national exercise, we may well have an audit on dashboards as well, to ensure the board and committee have the assurance that things are being done correctly in that area too.
I think it's wonderful, and must give members of the scheme a lot of confidence. I see no hands up on the risk management. Everybody is extremely happy. There are no comments in the chat. So thank you for that. And we are moving to item 11, which are any other items which the chairman decided to take as urgent. There are none, but I do have a small comment. If members feel that they have any particular training as well, no, I'll start. As you know, we normally have a little training session at the end of the meeting after we close it. But if members feel that there are any particular items they wish to wish Ian to include, or they want to go over, or they want to have an item in particular they want to have some more knowledge of, please do write to Kat and let her know. Right, and that then goes to item number 12 on our agenda, which is the date of our next meeting, and that is the 26th of October. Teams, I hope, because this is very handy. And I thank you all for being here this morning, and please stay online for Ian to make some comments in regards to training. But our official meeting is closed at 11:03. Thank you all, and close of this meeting, and over to Ian for a short talk on training. Thank you to all the officers.
We're offline.
Sorry, could you repeat that, please, Kate?
So I'm just checking that we're offline.